Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us to hear about the kink in the supply chain. If you have any questions during the program, please put them in the chat, or you can wait and at the end we'll do a Q&A session. Now I'd like to welcome Dan Doty of Delta Innovative Services to lead the presentation. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Crystal. Good morning, everybody. So I just made the joke a second ago. The only thing more boring than roofing supplies and talking about roofing is supply chain logistics. But this is extremely important considering what we're about to roll through for the holidays. So with that, I'll get into it. There is a pretty major congestion going on right now at the Port of San Pedro, which is a collection of two ports, the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach. To give you an idea for the size of these places, they're massive. These container ships will haul between 5,000 and 12,000 containers per vessel, depending upon the vessel. Historically, in the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach, there has never been more than a one-ship backlog. We have exceeded that in recent weeks. So for the Port of Long Beach, this is an extremely massive port. It is going to account for about nearly 1 in 5 containers that roll through the United States, 10 piers, 70 gantry cranes. This is the second busiest port in the United States. A lot of this trade will come through Eastern Asian, Pacific Rim countries, and this accounts for about 51,000 jobs. Port of Los Angeles is a little bit bigger. This picture was taken a number of weeks ago, but you can start to see the amount of ships that are just physically waiting to be unloaded. So there's two defined areas. There's off coast, which is the top right of the picture, and then there's berth. Once you enter this channelway, you're at berth. And then once you're at the actual dock, you're docked. Makes pretty much good sense. For Los Angeles, this is the busiest port in the country, not by volume, but by actual containers. The Port of Houston is the biggest port in the country based upon their pipeline traffic and their rail traffic. This Port of Los Angeles is roughly, again, 40% of all containers going through California, 1 in 5. So between the two ports, you can assume about 40% of the containers that pass into the country go through these two ports. This is the busiest port in the country, like I said, for 21 years in a row. 133,000 jobs from the Port of Los Angeles. So this is a major supplier of jobs to the Southern California area. And again, about 95% of all the trade traffic from here comes through Southeast Asia for the most part. So right now, between the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, we have 63 ships berthed with 100 ships waiting to enter, and that was of yesterday. 4 more ships have been added as of this morning to the waiting to enter the berth. This accounts for roughly 800,000 containers to be unloaded, and that's numbers only growing every day. The reason why this number is growing, there's a lot of issues here, but the major ones we're going to talk about in this presentation. The first one is there's no place to put these containers. The way this typically works is a person is going to haul on a truck what's known as a container chassis. The container chassis is what transports a container to and from the port. Empties go back to the port on these container chassis, and then when they drop off, they pick up a new one. What we're seeing right now is there is a zoning restriction in Southern California that says you cannot stack empty containers more than 2 high on private property. At the port, they can go higher than that, but in any other private sector, 2 is the limitation as far as height. This is kind of like the windmill conversation in Kansas where nobody wants to see it. Same thing in Southern California. But this presents a massive issue because these containers take up a lot of room when they're not stacked extremely tall. And that's just creating an absolutely stalemate between getting ships offloaded and getting the empty containers back on their ships to go back to their port of origin. There is a truck driver shortage. We're about 80,000 truck drivers light right now, and that number is only rising. There's another part of this in California, which is Assembly Bill 5. This was what came out earlier in the year, talking about Lyft and Uber, pretty much as if you have people working as an independent contractor, they have to be treated as an employee under Assembly Bill 5. They're pushing, some larger truck companies have begun to push back on this because it essentially will not outlaw, but become very difficult to be an owner operator in California. A lot of this has already started people to leave California from the trucking industry. And there is a massive shortage nationwide. from a trucking issue. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. Dock and warehouse workers are leaving at massive scale. When you have Amazon and other people hiring at higher rates in better conditioned facilities, people are going to leave. And then there's also just worker fatigue. When you start talking about they're going to work 24/7, well, there's only so much you can do when there's nothing that can be done as far as a space limitation. So we're going to start to see a tremendous amount of people leave because their hours are getting cut. There's no good way to say it, but this situation needs massive intervention to get it back on track quickly. The cost of inbound freight for a 20-foot container is up over 1,000% in the last 3 years. And that number, again, is only growing. If you look at the financial markets for these companies that are working freight, they're starting to put big bets on the price of freight continuing to rise over time, just because the reliance on container traffic is so heavy in the United States. Port closures were another big part of this. We saw a lot of Southeast Asian countries shut down or partially shut down their ports, and also start to automate in the time of COVID. So we're seeing a lot of back traffic from a shipping standpoint starting to pick back up. The best way I can explain this is if you've been in Nebraska Furniture Mart in the last year and a half and tried to buy anything, what's the answer? It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I have a couch that's been on order for 18 months and I'm probably not going to see it, but the sales there, we just can't physically get the product here. With COVID, people started to do a lot more online shopping. A lot of those products come from the Pacific Rim between Taiwan, China, Japan, and that's up about 250% over the last 18 months. Rerouting ships going to these ports is not only extremely expensive, it's pretty much illegal. Once you have a bill of lading from a country of origin, to change that in midstream takes a ton of work and it's not always approved. Not to mention that the traffic that are already at these major canals, that's been established for a long time. These are scheduled out months and months and months in advance, sometimes years in advance, so they can guarantee a time and a spot at the canal. So the Panama Canal really cannot accept any more traffic at this point from what they're already historically experiencing, and building a new canal through Central America probably isn't going to happen anytime soon. It's one of those things where there's no easy fix to this that doesn't take a lot of money and time. As we look at the driver shortage, this is from the National Organization of Truck Drivers. Again, they assume 80,000 drivers short now, and that number will only continue to grow. And there's a handful of reasons. We look at retirement as just kind of what the industry is facing. When I was in school, I did a paper about truck driving, of all things, and part of the reason why we've seen a consistent, addition of drivers into the fold is military conflicts. If you go from World War II to pretty much Desert Storm, we had people coming out of the military that had such bad PTSD, all they could do was drive. And actually, if you look at the kind of restocking of drivers, that's always followed a major military conflict. With Afghanistan and Iraq, that went out the window as the VA started to prescribe more drugs that can alter your state and will not let you pass the CDL drug test. So we have a tremendous amount of drivers retiring with no real pipeline to fill those people back in. Beyond that, industry growth is a big part of this. So as Amazon's starting to pay $85,000 and $90,000 for truck drivers, they need more people to drive for them, and they're pulling away a lot of drivers from other companies because they always work, their checks clear, and they have a lot of business to do. Drivers being pushed out of the industry, this comes down to, again, legislations and laws that have been passed that prohibit certain people from driving. One that was just passed not too long ago was, if you've ever had a felony on your record, no matter what time in your life, you can no longer drive hazmat. This has created a pretty massive shortage of drivers that we need, even regionally, to haul gas, to haul oil, to haul different things that require a hazmat certification. And there's only so many people that have those now, so the price continues to rise. And a lot of this comes down to is there's so much change in the industry. We have a lot of drivers just leaving because they're just not happy. This is a pretty telling graph of where we're at from a true supply chain issue. And this is about, this graph's about a month old. If I had to graph this now, we would go off the charts as far as the number of ships waiting to be unloaded. But you can tell, historically, again, the average of a backlog container ship in the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, 0, 1, maybe 2 as the holidays approach. But as we start to see ports getting shut down, people running on smaller crews, this traffic never stops. It just keeps coming. So what we're seeing is just a dramatic change in what's coming for container traffic into the ports. Thanks, Colin. This is a more telling one. This is the cost of this is a global container freight rate index. This is for the world. This is not for the United States. I can tell you right now that the cost of freight on these containers, it's about $16,000 a container now, is what the spot market was yesterday. So this graph is just going vertical right now. And a lot of that is just because these shipping companies are aware that there's only so much they can do, and they're going to get paid for every single part of it. Plus the cost of ownership of these massive vessels goes up proportionally to the cost of diesel fuel. This is a great graph kind of showing the 4 months before Christmas and the amount of containers coming through the port of Los Angeles. And you can see financial crisis in 2009, it dips below 1.3. And then as we go into the 2020s, it's going closer to 2 million units, which is a tremendous difference when you start talking about the infrastructure around these ports has not changed. They've not improved. They've not added more ability. It's simply just this is how much capacity we have. We're starting to see in other countries, Southeast Asia being the biggest leader on this, is fully automated ports where they don't have operators and they can run 24 hours a day. That investment has been going on for 25 years though in Singapore, and that's why they're their largest port in the world. Shanghai and Singapore actually share that. Consumer spending is another great dictator of what we're going to see for container traffic. And again, 2008, 2009, we can kind of see, this is seasonally adjusted, but we had a massive dip when people didn't know what was going on. And that dip represents when the stock market fell to 18,000 from 29,000. And then it went right back straight up as people got home and realized, well, I'm not spending money out going to eat. I'm not spending money out doing this. I'm going to start buying stuff. And that's created a massive uptick in the amount of spending on consumer goods that are coming from Southeast Asia on these container ships. What to expect is always a hard one to answer, but I think what I tell most people is if it's an inbound product from a neighboring country that comes by container, it's going to go up in price and it's going to get a lot harder to get. So frozen foods, frozen poultry, beef comes from Brazil for the most part, for the United States, the massive amount we see at least. Almost all electronics and toys will be in short supply this year if they're not made domestically. I would encourage anybody that is trying to purchase stuff for people this year for the holidays, look for local sources, makers, artisans, local companies that have manufacturing prowess in Kansas City and the region. We're going to see an increased cost of goods across the board. You can call it inflation, you can call it just the cost of getting stuff to us is going to go up dramatically, already has. And again, freight rates are what they are. They're passed along to consumers. They're not absorbed because nobody has the amount of money they need to absorb a $15,000 change in the cost of a container. So it's gone up pretty dramatically. Seasonal items, decorations, disposable goods will be heavily affected. If you don't have wrapping paper right now, I'd suggest if you want some, you go buy it because 95% of our wrapping paper comes from China. Every major retailer, with the exception of Amazon, is expected to sell less this year than last year. Amazon has made a pretty critical investment in their own ports. They've started to realize with how much they buy and where it's coming from, they need their own supply chain, and they have one. So it's going to be a good year for them. What you can do right now is plan as best you can. If your stuff you're looking to do for your home, if it's stuff you look to do for your property, for your business, for whatever it might be, and you don't expect to buy that for 12 months, start trying to source it now. This is only going to get more expensive and more difficult to source product. This is going to hit the paint industry pretty hard. The additives and the solids that go into paint production primarily come from Southeast Asia. There are domestic manufacturing operations, but we're not seeing the kind of uptick in domestic production as we thought we could. Furniture is going to get extremely hard to get. So again, if you're going to be buying a new house and you're trying to figure out what you want to stick in there, you go figure it out now, because it's going to take you conservatively 6 to 18 months to get your product in. Toys, I love toys for my niece and nephew, but this year they're probably going to get gift cards for future purchases because there's just not enough around. If you're looking at construction projects for properties, you can tell your owners to expect to pay between 40 and 60% more than this time in last year. It's just construction materials have gone absolutely radioactive, and there's not a lot of relief in sight based upon supply chain issues as they sit now, as well as trucking problems. You want to discuss with your contractors what can be done to defer some of these massive capital expenses, because even if you can get the product, you're going to spend more now than you will next year, or even even more so in 2 years. What I kind of tell people is hold on, because the next 12 to 18 months are going to be a whole lot different than anything you ever experienced from a purchasing standpoint. So I know I kind of ran through that, but there is a lot of information here to unpack, and I think it comes down to questions more than anything else. So if anybody has any questions, I'll happily turn it over to them. Any questions?
I have a question. One of the issues I noticed was that some of the laws that were being passed that kind of holding up some of the possible ways that the problem can be fixed. Are they looking at loosening laws or coming up with a solution to sort of get this backlog?
Yeah, so the clearest path right now to starting to alleviate some of these issues in Southern California with the space concern is you're talking about intervention at the state or the federal level. So if the mayor of California, mayor of Los Angeles, the mayor of Long Beach, the supporting areas decided they want to put a 180-day moratorium on these zoning restrictions that don't allow for stacking containers more than 2 high, if you get rid of that for 6 months and you can start stacking, the problem gets fixed quicker than doing nothing at all, which is what's happening right now. There was an independent investigation done by a guy in the freight industry where he captained a ship. He hired a captain to take him out in the port of Los Angeles and to actually watch the cranes work. And in 1 hour, he observed 7 containers coming off a ship. That's it. The issue was they just physically don't have the space to get trucks in and out and to place these containers on the ground. So fixing the space problem is not easy, because obviously in Southern California, there's businesses, establishers, every piece of that usable land is already being used. But they've taken to a point of trying to ship some of these containers to Texas, to Louisiana. The idea being is that once they're on the ground, you can transport them. You can do that. The more thoughtful way of looking at this is there something we can do in California that still gives people access to the highway system and gets those containers to a place where they're not traveling 4 or 5 days by train to then be transported back out to the country. People forget, all these containers already have a logistical plan behind them, how to get them from the port to the warehouse, to the consumer, to the distribution facility. So when people say, "Oh, just ship it over here," well, that's great. You still have to get it back to where it's supposed to go. And that's extremely expensive when you start changing last minute, especially when there aren't enough drivers. But, legislation wise, intervention wise, it's going to take federal involvement and probably mobilizing the National Guard. The National Guard has about 200,000 container chassis at their disposal that they could mobilize pretty quickly into Southern California. And then again, that's just one of those deals where this is going to cost money to fix if you want to try and save Christmas. So it's definitely a long-term play to fix the port problem. But right now, it's just nobody ever expected this level of traffic to hit the ports, and there's no plan because there's no space. It takes a lot to get this thing corrected, and it's going to take a lot of people bending more than they probably want to get it fixed. But I can tell you straight up that we're about to see, I would say, in estimates of 40 to 50 more ships hit this week that have no place to go. So you're talking about a backlog of shipping in years, not weeks, not months, years to try and fix this. So, again, the planning side of this thing is pretty impressive if you want to try and cover yourself in the future for purchases, for stuff you need to do for your properties. The microchip or the issues we're seeing right now are not getting fixed quickly. It's just it's a supply chain issue, and it's hitting everybody in the teeth pretty hard. So, other questions?
Just Dan, it's not really a question. It's just add on to your talking about the port's inefficiency. Yeah, you're right that they've been inefficient for 25 years. Reuters listed them as 300 out of 351 ports in the world. LA was like 333 and Long Beach was like 328. And a good part of that is because of the Longshoremen's Union fought automation. And that's why one of the reasons we're in the pickle. And the other one is with the trucks in California, if your truck is older than 2004, you're not allowed to drive in the state. So, and as of next year, it'll be 2007. You know, so the environmental regulations, California is also hurting this whole thing.
It's a great point, Tom, and I appreciate it. But you know, what we're seeing is there's been pushing from the California legislature to convert the truck traffic to all electric by 2035, which is a great goal, except those trucks don't exist and private businesses still need to reinvest to get new trucks. So there's a lot of companies that are kind of in limbo right now. Do we buy more trucks? Do we try and, you know, wait till this becomes available to start the fleet? But it's going to be, again, a lot of people reevaluating the things they put in place of, are these actually attainable and achievable? And again, automation is the name of the game. There is a human capital problem here, which is an automated port needs operators. It does not need people that sit in a gantry crane all day long and have to physically work by hand. It's all automated from a robotic standpoint. That is where these other massive ports will beat us in just handling container traffic. The Port of Oakland is on that list, and it's even worse than Los Angeles and Long Beach. But you know, they're the closest port that you could physically try and reroute to. They can't handle it. They have pretty much said, we're peaked out. We can't get our guys to show up. We can't get our people to unload at a rate that actually matches the industry. So again, a lot to work with here, but it just, from an educational standpoint, I would tell everybody on this call that this is a real problem that nobody wants to jump on because it has such massive implications to the economy. If you're wrong, it's a career killer. And from a politician standpoint, I don't care what side you sit on, this is one that's just going to require a lot of hard conversations that nobody really wants to listen to. But you can't ignore the fact that we're missing an exceptional amount of opportunity from an economy standpoint because we just can't get product. Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add on that I've got a nephew that's a director at Peterbilt. You know, it's not a matter of buying, whether you buy new trucks, they're just like the automobiles. I mean, they got them stacked up at their production facilities, you know, that they pull the chips out of to test them as they come off the assembly line, and then they go set them out there with no chips in them. So you can't even buy newer trucks if you want them. That's not an option right now. They have so many sales that they can't fill. It's unbelievable. It's just like the car industry. So it's not a matter of whether you're going to get people to pull the trigger on new trucks to drive in California. They're not available.
Right. Yeah.
I'll
Sure.
add to that in the HVAC industry, because we have similar situations. In fact, a week ago, we asked the manufacturer to ship out a rooftop unit without a couple of parts and pieces. And because they weren't going to be ready for the next week, until the next week, and we didn't want to delay the shipment. So we went ahead and they shipped it, we installed it, and then we basically installed the parts that were missing later when they arrived. So it's hitting everybody as far as the chip shortages go. And the only thing I can tell you about HVAC is if you've got boilers prepared to change out this summer, you better get them ordered pretty quick. Otherwise we won't be able to get them in time. Same thing with chillers. If you got chillers that want to be replaced next winter, we better have those ordered by spring.
No, it's a great point. And we're making the same conversation about the roofing industry, which is if you're trying to do a roofing project next summer, cut a PO now. It's a one-way insurance policy. If we have to cancel it, we have so much time and play to do so. But if we try and jump on the train in June or May, we're not going to get it next year. So again, from a planning standpoint, there is a tremendous amount you can do now to look at your assets, what you're going to need to do for them, talk to your allied, your partners in the industry, and figure out what can we do either to limp it by until that time comes, or if you're trying to replace, get a plan together, get with ownership, explain to them this is not going to fix itself fast, and go forward with that. But there is a lot to be done on the planning side because it's not going to get easier quickly.
And put a plan in place for your rental equipment, generators, boilers, chillers, rooftop units. Talk to your rental companies, figure out a way. If you've got a chiller that might go down this summer, pipe in some temporary valves and just have them already there just in case it does go down. There's a lot of things that you can do and you can rent. It's not cheap, but it's an option because if your equipment goes down, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to get parts, especially if it's an older and aging piece of equipment.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Other questions?
Yeah, with this issue, how long do you think it's going to last? I mean, as far as before we, I mean, your opinion before we see a turnaround?
With the current plan of action that's in place, which is none, 5 to 6 years. With what I believe is coming from the federal level, 12 to 18 months. And again, this just turns into a thing where this machine is so large and so powerful. When it stops, the amount of effort it's going to take to restart it is exceptional. And again, I'm literally hearing people talking about a zoning restriction. I don't care what it takes. That's the kind of stuff that just has to be said. No, we're just doing it. You can vote me out of office, but this is not, there's that many jobs on the line in Southern California. If it doesn't go right, I mean, that'll cripple an entire segment of the industry. But yeah, it's bad if we don't do anything more than what we're doing now. And it's much better if we start to really have uncomfortable conversations. Other questions?
I have one last question before we'll end. If everybody wants to come back on their camera, I'll take a group photo. Does anybody want to come on their camera? Oh, here they come. Yay. I want to see your faces. Okay. Oh, look. Hi, Claudia.
Come on, Doug.
Okay,
Come on,
wait.
Tech.
I'll do a quick plug while we're on the phone.
Not a chance.
We have another webinar like this next week. It's about hiring. It's called Widen the Net. You also should join for that as well. Okay, so I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to start taking some pictures. So thank you all for joining us. Yay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got a whole bunch, so I'm sure they're going to be great. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Dan Doty of Delta Innovative Services, for joining us and presenting today. Great presentation, and thank you all. It was great to see you all today.
Great job, Dan. You did your homework. It was awesome.
Thank you.